Do you guys have production meetings here at the bar?
Sometimes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. We have lunch.
I want to have a production meeting at the bar. I'm your host, Jeff Sart. We're going to take you behind the scenes with the craft distillers who are pouring their heart and soul into crafting the next version of America's spirit. This is the Great American Whiskey Cookers. On this edition of the Great American Whiskey Cookers, we are headed to New Richmond, Wisconsin, and we're going to go to 45th Parallel Distillery. Now, this whiskey distillery is making all sorts of whiskeys. Finished whiskeys, they've got a red fife wheat whiskey, they've got rye whiskeys.
And their head distiller, Bob, is from Scotland.
A distiller from Scotland named Bob. How can you miss this distillery? These guys are growing beyond leaps and bounds, and they're putting in a brand new rick house that's going to hold 2,500 plus barrels. Check it out. Welcome to 45th Parallel Distillery. We're going to go in and check out their whiskey and see what it's all about. This is the Great American Whiskey Cookers. Welcome to this edition of the Great American Whiskey Cookers. We are here today in New Richmond, Wisconsin at 45th Parallel, and we're talking to the guys here about their whiskey. So before we get started, I'm going to have these guys introduce themselves and tell you just exactly who they are.
So I'm Bob McKenzie. I'm the lead distiller. I've been working here for 5 years. Prior to that, I worked in the brewing industry for about 23 years. And before that, I was studying brewing and distilling in college over in Scotland.
As I say, your accent is not a Wisconsin accent.
No, it's not. And I'm not very good at accents, so I've never picked up a local one. I keep with this one.
You just stay with the Scottish accent.
Right, yeah.
That works.
I'm Paul Werney. I'm the founder.
So you started the place?
Yes.
And you started it back when?
We broke ground on this facility in 2006. We got our permits in spring of 2007.
All right, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I'm Anton Warney. I'm the general manager for the events-based restaurant. I've been here on and off pretty much most of my life. Since we opened this, I'm his son when I was in 5th grade, so yeah.
How did you get to whiskey? How did you decide to open up a whiskey business? What's your backstory?
When I opened up, whiskey wasn't the thing.
Okay.
Vodka was the king. Yeah, vodka outsold everything else combined. And there weren't, premium vodkas were relatively new. There weren't that many distilleries, so we started making vodka. That's all we made in the beginning. 2 years into it, a gentleman I had met when we first started up asked us to make bourbon for them. And that's when we started making bourbon. Unfortunately, we did, because right now, whiskey is hot, and 95% of our production is whiskey now.
You and your family don't come to whiskey from a heritage growing up with it.
No.
What were you doing before whiskey?
I had another business. I had a landscape construction business in the city of Minneapolis with a friend, and then my wife said I worked too much, so I had to sell my half of the business. And I was actually a stay-at-home dad when I started this up.
Really?
Yeah.
And so how did you learn how to distill and to run a whiskey business?
Well, as a stay-at-home dad, I had a fair amount of time, and I took that time to research it.
So your still, what kind of still are you running then?
All our stills are Christian Carl stills, or they call it Carl now. The reason why is, like I said, when we started up, you could not buy equipment in the United States. Nobody was making equipment for somebody of our size.
Sure.
So the Germans were doing a good job of it, and we ended up buying equipment from them. Once we got used to their equipment, whenever we bought a new still, we just went right back to them.
All right, so let me back up. So when you say no one was making stills for your size being?
A craft distillery, a small. We're a micro distillery. I mean, we're on the big side of a micro distillery, but we're still a micro distillery.
All right. So you're talking a still, and how big are the stills?
Well, the first one was a 650. The Germans like to call, Carl will call a 650 liter still.
Okay.
Vendome it'd be more like 1,000 liter still for them. And then we have a couple thousands, which would be more like a 2,000 liters. And then we have the big four, which is probably more like 6,000 or 8,000 Vendome.
right, so this is your first still.
Yep, this is our first still. So this one primarily now we just do second distillations in. So that's what you're seeing in there.
And what's running in there right now?
That's bourbon. Bourbon. So it's probably in the middle of the house, just based on where it is. Honestly, it boils, goes through the condenser, comes out here. It's currently coming out just a little below 160 proof.
Okay.
But typically when we do our cuts, we'll do maybe, we always dump the very first gallon that comes off.
Sure.
Because it's, technically, a lot of people will reuse that, but there's a lot of stuff in there, and we just figured it's better to dump it. Our heads cut is usually in the ballpark of maybe 5-ish gallons, and then we go into hearts. Usually the hearts will start just a little under 160 is usually a good spot for them to start, and then we drop down to about 120 proof. Paul's a big fan of very clean whiskey, which he's taught me. It's the way to make whiskey. So we do pretty early tails cut. But again, it works. It's good whiskey.
You walked me over here to these other two stills, and these are the other two of the four stills that you have, right? And this one's entirely smaller than the other two we were looking at, but this one's massively bigger.
Yeah, this is a big still. It's getting closer to what you'd see in Scotland, so I kind of feel more at home in this one.
Do you?
But yeah, so basically this one again is primarily a stripper. It's got the kind of the more aggressive slant on the swan neck.
Mm-hmm.
So you getting more flavor, a bit less reflux on that one. We can get basically 2 fermenters worth into this still and distill them, so it really helps with production. Obviously, as busy as we are, the whole thing's a juggling act between this still and the stills over there. We try and distill about 5 mashes a day. We're usually mashing about 4 times a day. I figured we'd actually be a pretty decent sized brewery if all the mash we did stayed as beer versus for whiskey. We'd be a pretty nice sized brewery.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, there's a lot of the production is just balancing that. But this one's stripping. This one is more for spirits.
Okay.
And again, with the 2 pot stills, so the big advantage of the pot stills versus the 2 older stills is just you come off, there's less reflux, so you come off with slightly lower proof, which means with more congeners in there.
Yep.
They're basically, they're going to give us more flavor, but they might need a little bit longer to age out. So it's good having kind of that combination. So we've got some people that are looking for high proof whiskeys because they want to get out in the market in 2 years versus these, 5 years can make a really good product.
What's the still cost?
It depends. If you're buying decent equipment, each time that you buy a still, right now a nice size or a still that we would want is probably around $200,000-$300,000
Per still.
But if you want to get a column, you're talking $500,000 starting.
How much bourbon, how much whiskey are you putting out or putting down a day, a week, month?
We do a lot of contract work. So we're putting out probably close to 40 barrels a week. Of our own stuff, we probably do 600-700 barrels a year. But yeah, we're busy distillery.
We're 7 days.
So you're distilling 7 days a week.
7 days a week, and during the week there's 2 shifts.
Do a breakdown for me. Your whiskey that you're producing versus contract, 40-60%, 50-50?
It's probably more like, as far as production goes,
Yeah.
it's probably more like 65-70% contract. The rest.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're pushing out a lot of whiskey for a lot of other
Yeah.
brands.
Yeah.
so to speak. They're not distillers, but they're NDPs.
Some of them are distillers.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of them are, they might be a small startup distiller. Them are really, really small. They don't have the ability, the cash flow to produce on their own. And so they come to us and ask us, hey, can you make, it could be like 5-10 barrels at a time.
Oh, okay.
And that's how we're doing it.
All right.
It's oftentimes as well, people as they open the distillery, they want to get some barrels in storage so that when they open, they actually have whiskey on hand.
Sure.
So kind of in 3 years' time, they'll have their distillery, but in the meantime, they've got some whiskey aging.
Right. So let's talk about barrels then. What kind of barrels are you using? Does the customer get to pick the char level in the barrel, or are you advising them on that?
Well, maybe a couple of years ago they could, but right now, that's the toughest part of this industry, right? Barrels are in short supply. No, we pretty much, most of what we do is medium char, and most of our barrels have all come from McGinnis. They're out of Cuba, Missouri. They're air-dried staves. They had the largest air-dried stave supply in the world.
Oh, wow.
It's Ozark oak. It's getting harder. We're their only small customer. Like they have they have Heaven Hill, Sazerac, and us.
Really?
So that's it. The hard part about that is I just did a favor for somebody a long time ago, and so we were able to give them our name and get into their production schedule. But they're not taking on new customers. They're not taking any. They got rid of almost all their small customers. It's really hard to find barrels right now.
And the reason for that is why?
Their reason was a shortage of wood that's cut.
Okay.
Demand. Like you go to ISC, ISC will talk to you and they'll put you on a waiting list. But they won't, like right now, ISC's, we've had customers that have been with them for years. But they want to increase their production, but they can't because ISC says we can only sell you what we sold you last year. There's just too much demand. Too many people are trying to find barrels. If you're a small distiller starting right now, good luck with making whiskey. Because
the hurdles for getting some of the supplies?
For at least the next couple of years, you're not going to be able to get a barrel. But if you do, you're going to be put on a waiting list. You might be able to find some small barrels from small coopers. Mm-hmm. And that's it. But to find some really nice wood, air-dried wood, that's not going to happen.
Really?
Not for the next couple of years.
So tell me where we're at. Obviously the rack house, but what all do you have going on here?
A lot going on in this room right here.
How many barrels?
Roughly 2,500.
Roughly.
We never really know the exact number unless you're sitting totaling them up, but roughly 2,500 because it's changing with what we're filling, what we're harvesting, contracts that are going out.
And you have everything in this rack house for the most part, right? The stuff you're contracting, your rye, your bourbon, you have everything in here.
Yes, minus the barrels you kind of saw an overflow and then the wood rack and that barreling area we talked about earlier.
Right.
But everything there is kind of waiting for room out here as we clear a roll. We like to keep them in order. Yeah. So somewhere behind all this, it was done a long time ago, but it is in a nice order. But then the inside of the aisles kind of are the oddballs that are smaller quantities, so it's kind of hard to fill a whole roll with them.
And I can see there's about 5 barrels deep going back that way, right? And I'm assuming it's probably another 4 or 5 barrels deep going back that way.
Yep.
So there's a lot of barrels here. You said roughly around 2,500, right?
And then we get a big shipment of bottles in or a barrel truck comes. So this is kind of just the staging area until we use them. So
got it.
I like it when I can see all the way through.
And which you can't see right now.
Once since I've been here. I was pretty proud of it, and then it filled up the next week. So, yep.
The rack house that we're sitting in, this is a non-heat cycle rack house, right?
Yes.
And this is your original rack house.
Yes.
We're surrounded by barrels that are, 7 levels deep?
6.
6 levels deep. So this new rack house, is it the same size that you're going to be building? Bigger, smaller?
It'll be a little bigger.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And you're going to heat cycle that one, right?
Yes. Yes. I initially thought that I agreed with the prevailing winds of trying to mimic Kentucky aging. But after a few years of experiencing aging in this rick house, I changed my mind. We're northern Wisconsin. This is not Kentucky.
Right.
So if our next rick house is gonna have some heat, we can be 20 below here for 10 days in a row.
Yeah.
Not 20, but I mean, we'll have like 20 degree days, 20 degree below days. We won't be above zero for 2-3 weeks.
Right.
Yep.
And we'll have 2 feet of snow outside.
Is it cold here in the rick house?
Yeah. Well, it's warmer than outside, don't get me wrong, but it's cold.
It's about 30 degrees.
Yeah, it doesn't ever really get below 30 degrees. It could be 30 below outside, but it'll be about 30 degrees
Yep.
here. Just because of this big mass.
Sure.
But it also in summer, it's always cooler.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like a cooler.
Right.
So I really would prefer to our new rick house to keep it not let it get below 50 degrees. And I guarantee you, rick houses in Kentucky aren't getting below 50 degrees.
Yeah, probably not.
No.
It's the nice thing about whiskey is that the local climate influences the product. So we're not making beer where you can make the same thing in different parts of the world and get to taste the same. Each area kind of has its own unique climate, which influences the product.
Mm-hmm. When you put it in the barrel, what's your barrel entry proof for the whiskey geeks?
We go in about 117 is what we're shooting for, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then reused barrels, we go in a little higher because a lot of the tannins and stuff have already been extracted by the first use.
Sure.
But second use we only do on single malt, few specialty things. We do some aquavits that are aged. But yeah.
Okay. And your angel share? What's your angel share kind of run at?
I mean, when I used to really track it, it was probably around 14%. Some rye barrels would go up to like 20, 21%.
Oh, wow.
But I would say it's actually changed a little bit. I'd say it's probably in that 14, 15%.
And you were saying during COVID, you had a little bit of an issue with glass.
Supply chain, yes. A large manufacturer of glass in the United States closed up right in the middle of COVID. It went over to India, but the transition was not smooth. And then they're saying, if you want any bottles next year, you got to order now, because we don't know if we can get you bottles next year.
So you said you made the decision that you're going to a
custom bottle after about a year of not being sure if you were going to find glass or not. We were one of the fortunate ones. We were always able to, in the end, find glass. But I decided I'm not going to be at the mercy of those suppliers anymore. So we're going with a custom bottle in the next couple months.
So you'll see this bottle here that we're seeing that all your whiskey's in will get switched over to a new bottle.
A different bottle. Yeah, we went with a custom design and a significant supplier, a large supplier, an international supplier. So we just don't want to have those supply chain issues anymore.
I can understand that. This is your bottling area, right?
This is our bottling line.
Yeah, what's happening here? What am I seeing? What am I looking at?
Right here, what we saw in the room was a tank, one of the tanks from that room.
Right.
You don't want to just, like I said, harvest it and bottle it right away. It's harvested, it's sitting in that room, you kind of find the proof that it's at.
Right.
Cut it with water to the proof you're bottling it at.
Nice.
You want to let it sit and blend with that water for a while. That's why it's in that room. So this tank was harvested and blended a while ago. Weeks, months, depending on what product and the turnover. Brought out here, this product is at 92 proof. We load cases of bottles onto the conveyor belt over there. They run through and they get rinsed, filled, and then leveled and corked. It's running a pump constantly from this machine, so we have to make sure the valves are all open and it continuously fills it. From there, if it's a product that needs a label, it'll run through the labeler, but in this case, these are a screen printed bottle, which makes it easier on us. So they come out here. With this particular product, it's a good day because this is one of our best sellers.
Right.
Regular bourbon.
Right. Exactly.
So this,
Go ahead.
yeah, this next step here, what Jordan is doing is putting a piece of tape around it. So we cut individual pieces of tape, wrap it around the bottle. So that's your pull tab to be able to get the wax top. So he's lining them up here. These bottles are already taped. These are dipping. So
And then that's how you let the wax, you just let it drip off.
let it drip off and dry. It goes surprisingly quick, but when you're sitting here doing thousands of bottles a day, it's like this is the bottleneck area.
Sure.
Um,
And this looks like a super engineered thing.
You know, I've only been here about a year, but I hear a lot of, well, back in the day, we had to hand dip them and hold them like this. So somebody who worked here long ago,
Built that?
built that for us, and it works. We're still using it.
Yeah.
If we had more people here, we would have another person on the other side. You dip 6 at a time. But see, the wax kind of started to stop dripping there. Rod's going to dip it in water to just cool it one more time, and then it's ready to go. So here's that little tab with the
Oh,
tape.
yeah. And then it's ready to go into the box.
Yep, the last step is our little leather tab.
And
Kinda-
talk to me about the leather tab again. What does it stand for? I mean, I've noticed that, but so there's a date on it.
Yep, the date is the age of the barrel.
Okay.
So a lot of people probably buy this and don't even really realize it.
So if I pick up a bottle and it's got, say, 2016, that's when
It was barreled.
it was barrel, was 2016.
Yep. So our rye right now and our wheat is getting there. It's almost 7 years old.
Okay.
Well, all the rye we're about in right now is 6. The bourbon is 5.
Nice.
So that gets put on the bottle like that, thrown in a case and put on a pallet. It's a fun one to watch.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, you would never guess that they're all hand dipped for the most part.
Right.
And how how you do it. How much did it cost you to start this distillery?
Basically, like I said, when my old business and I sold out I had some finances.
Right.
And I paid for about half of the startup, but it was, probably around 500,000 to start up initial, or 700, actually 700,000 was the initial startup of our distillery. One still, one column, some fermenter, actually 2 fermenters and a mashing kettle, the boiler, the lot, the building. We did build a new building, so that was about, half of it. People come in and they want to taste your product, they want to have some cocktails, but they're not going to stick around if you don't have food.
Right.
So I thought we would have some food.
Just small.
And
something. Yeah.
one of my friends who was working here, he has a restaurant background, and I said, hey, just design us a kitchen for me. His background in restaurants is more of an Italian style, and so he put this kitchen together, and he gave me a list of what the stuff costs, and I saw the price of the Italian pizza oven, and I crossed it out. I'm not going to spend this. And I went to the bank and showed them everything, and they were like, why don't you have a price for this pizza oven? And I said, because it's too expensive. And the bank looked at me and said, we think it's worth it. And they put it back in.
Really?
Budget. They put it back in the budget, and fortunately for us, because that's how we're defined right now, up front. The Italian pizza oven, that's what people come for.
Yeah, so it wasn't intentional to be a full-fledged restaurant. It just kind of became that.
Yeah.
The demand was there in this town, and they really wanted it.
And I was noticing that in your event center, there's 2 big doors, one on each end of the building.
Yeah.
The whole door opens up the event center and bar, right?
Yeah, they're basically 2 massive hangar doors.
It's cool as hell. I mean, having those doors open, you can see all the way through the building, and it opens it up to the outside, and that's got to be just all sorts of fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of character to that.
That's the first thing. So there are customers that will say, if the doors aren't open, we're not coming in.
Really.
It'll be 92 degrees.
And then with the doors,
And they're like, we come here for the doors. It's just like, well, our kitchen's kind of hot back there. But
yeah.
yeah.
When we first started up, you're talking a few $100,000, Now, when you build, you're talking millions. So that's, it's not 100,000 here or 100,000 there. It's $1 million.
Right.
That's basically what every time you add on.
So, with the finances of the distillery, how long did it take before you got into black?
I mean, I think accounting-wise, we lost money the first few years.
Yeah.
I didn't pay myself for the first 3 years, and fortunately, my wife had a solid income, and that allowed me to do that. I don't think we really started making money. I mean, to where I was comfortable with it, probably until about 5 or 6 years into it.
Sure.
Yeah. It was touch and go a few years.
Yeah.
Because we're not in a tourist area. We're not in a large population area.
Right.
It took a while. And then in the beginning, if you had another micro distillery in your state and they were putting out stuff that wasn't good, then the general population thought all micro distilleries were bad. Why do I want to buy that? I've had this other distillery stuff and I don't like it.
Yeah.
You're going to be the same.
Yeah, that's that bias that comes with thinking that all craft whiskey is the same.
Yeah.
And it's just not. How many expressions of whiskey do you have?
So we've got the 3 main whiskies. We've got bourbon, we've got the wheat whiskey, and we've got a rye whiskey. But we do have different variations in them all. So on the wheat whiskey, we've got a regular wheat whiskey, and we actually have another farmer that we work with that's growing a heritage whiskey or a heritage wheat that his grandparents grew back in this area probably 100 or so years ago. So that's a red Fife whiskey. So that's a variation on the wheat. We have on all the 3 whiskeys, we've got a bottled and bond, we've got a cask strength, and then our regular whiskey we do at 92 proofs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that covers most of it. Oh, we also have a rye 100, so 100% rye, no malted barley at all. So we've got that one.
We do different finishes too.
Yeah.
Right.
Like cognac, port.
I noticed the big, the cognac barrel over here, right?
Yeah.
That you're finishing some whiskey in?
Yeah, maple finishes. So we have a lot of maple producers in the area. And so what we'll do is, at first I used to say no to them, but now we'll let them take our bourbon barrels or any bourbon. They want the bourbon. Everybody wants bourbon, but we'll try to get them to take the wheat barrels or the rye barrels too. And we won't charge them. They use them as what we say, we want the barrels back.
Sure.
And so if they give us the barrels back, then we finish in those barrels.
Talk to me about your name, 45th Parallel. I mean, I can make an assumption here, but I want to hear from you. And how did you land on that?
Okay, so I grew up east of here about 3 hours, and there was a sign that I used to drive by that said, "You're at the 45th Parallel." And then I went to school in Minnesota, and I lived in Minneapolis, and the 45th Parallel goes through there. And Scott, who you'll talk to later, he's a restaurant and wine guy, and he told him about the 45th Parallel. He said, "Oh, yeah, well, some of the best restaurants in the world are along 45th Parallel, and some of the greatest spirit-producing regions, like in France and Italy and different parts of the world. They're perfect for that type of climate, for that type of production, as far as wine production." And then once I read an article about vodka. All the grain for almost all grain for vodka is grown north of the 45th Parallel.
Really?
Yeah. So then I decided to call us 45th Parallel because the 45th Parallel actually goes through the farm that we get our grain from.
So tell me, how does somebody find you guys online? What's the best way for them to learn all about you or find you?
Well, we get our website online, Facebook, we're posting every day, Instagram. We're even going to add a TikTok soon.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And
jumping into the TikTok realm.
Yeah, I'm not huge into it, but they do well. So
right.
Twitter, we're on there as well.
I never thought we'd turn into this, but we have like a full-time, she's a social media person.
That's all she does.
Yeah, she's full-time doing that. We have a full-time public relations person now. And so it's
So you guys are really starting to scale up.
it's changing. Well, we're trying to increase our inventory
Yeah.
so that we can sell more.
And the website, what's the website? Give me the address.
It's 45th Parallel Distillery at 45thparalleldistillery.com. Actually,
And it's the number 45, not
45th. Yep.
45th Parallel Distillery.com.
We're completely revamping
Yep.
our website right now. So
So you're getting a new website, you're getting a new bottle.
Yep.
So there's a lot of changes coming up in the next year. That's great. Hey, we want to thank you for joining us on this episode of the Great American Whiskey Cookers. Paul, thank you for opening up your distillery, walking us around, showing us everything, and talking about the whiskey that you're making. An enormous amount of fun. And Scott, thank you for the pizza. Best pizza I've had since Italy. Oh man, it was awesome. And for joining us for the tastings. It was super great. Hey, you can find them at 45thparalleldistillery.com. Better yet, if you're here in New Richmond, stop by, have a whiskey, have a pizza, and enjoy the atmosphere and enjoy everything that's going on. For us, you can find us at thegreatamericanwhiskeycookers.com. Until next time, if you can't be good at it. See ya.
The Richmond Dry was the first American whiskey I had where it's like, oh, that's not bad. Maybe Americans can actually make whiskey. So that one I do go back to quite often, and really, it's still a great whiskey.
Hey, whiskey's all about sitting around, enjoying with your friends and sharing it, which is what we're doing here. Join our Patreon page, and you never know, you might get invited out here to have some whiskey, play some games, and just have a good time. When you do join our Patreon site, you'll get access to exclusive content and some behind-the-scenes footage. Until next time, if you can't be good at it. See ya.
If you make it in the drink, what is that game, or is that like you lose?
Ooh.
With this stuff,
Dad,
it's
have you tried
probably
this?
you lose.
No. Come here and try this. Which one is it? This is Beer Barrel Bourbon. This is one of my favorite craft whiskeys.